No, it just started pouring. Hello, we are live. Hello, everybody. I am very excited to, actually, I am speaking face to face for the first time.
Yeah.
Michael and I have communicated via messaging and comments on each other's posts and stuff like that, but have never had the opportunity to
Yeah.
have a full conversation in this fashion. So I'm really excited about that just in general. I do want to thank everybody who's here, whether you're here live, whether you're watching this recorded. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen in to our conversation and see what you can take away from it. I'm always excited knowing that something's going to get said that is going to impact somebody's life. I just know that. And so I think it's super cool. Like, you don't know where in the world that's going to take place, but there's so many opportunities for that. As I generally tell people, sometimes we don't notice the comments or they don't feed over. Please know that we will look at all of the platforms afterwards to make sure that if there were comments or questions asked that we missed, we do get to those. And of course, you can feel free to reach out to me if you want to connect with Michael. We'll be getting his contact information later on. But I want to really dig into this conversation. So as always, Michael, tell everybody who you are and what you do, and then we'll dig in and chat.
Yes, thank you, Deb, and thanks for having me on your podcast. I was excited about today and being here. It's really, really a pleasure and a blessing for me to be here. My name is Michael Willis. I'm a business operations professional. I worked for the National Football League for 22 and a half years. I really had a great experience there. It kind of shaped and molded me. And I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. When I was a child, I thought, where I lived and the surroundings around me, I thought that was the end of the earth. I didn't realize that the world was so big. And my sister, I had an older sister, she did a project at school, and it was a family tree type of project. And she did the project. She talked to my grandmother. Her grandmother gave her all this information. And she finished the project. She just put the paper down. And I looked at it, and I seen these names on there I've never even seen or heard of before. And that made me really curious about, and that sparked my curiosity about where did I come from and who are these people? And I know, when it comes to human beings, they come from someone else, and who goes back, a little further. So that kind of used that curiosity to go into my career. So when I started the NFL, I started at a very grassroots league that was starting up. It was called NFL Europe at the time, around 1995. And when I first started, the season was ending, so a new season was about to begin. So I asked my boss, and I said, well, what happened last season? Is there anything I should know? So again, curiosity, anything I should know? He said, well, we did have some payroll issues, and some of the guys were going to be a mutiny because they weren't being paid on time. They didn't have their direct deposit, didn't have the banking. So I said, well, when the players come into training camp this year, can we go down there? Can I go down there to be there when they arrive so I can get their W-4 and make sure it's all filled out? Because sometimes people, they don't have their address correct, or sometimes an apartment number or zip code, or they don't put single, zero, married one, they don't have that correct, and their banking. So when they came in, I was able to get all that information and staple their banking, their direct deposit, their voided check with the information. So I had all that information, and the impact was that, you want to do things right. You want to do what we say we're going to do. If we say we're going to pay you every week, we have to do that. So that was my impact, and that was the impact that the league had on me. So finally, that league lasted about 12 years. So around 2007, the league kind of folded, that league. So they trying to get everyone jobs, keep everyone. So I went into the officiating department. So I went into NFL officiating, and it was a great group, 124. At the time, it was all males, and now there's a mixture, which is great. I think it's a great time for women in sports. And I went to the union chief, and the guy that was in charge of the union, and I said, I introduced myself. I said, can I help you? How is everything going? He said, well, things are going okay. I would just say okay. There's some problems that we have between you guys and us. It's like you against us. I'm like, what do you mean you against us? He says, we have issues where our guys aren't being paid on time. We don't have a payroll schedule. Expenses at the end of the season, because we advance in the money, and sometimes they owe us or we owe them, and they're not getting their expenses paid. The Super Bowl is the first week of February, and expenses aren't paid until sometimes in May. I said, no, we can do better than that. So I did. I went to my boss, and he said, well, just don't overpromise something. So the whole thing is about solving problems. So I think there's two paths to solving problems. One is get ahead of the problem, and the other is fix the problem so it doesn't come back again. So people always say all the time, I'm a problem solver. I'm a problem solver. So for my way of solving problems is getting ahead of it. And I remember we had the economic crisis of 2007 and 8. I was told to go through our budgets, and anything that wasn't nailed down with a contract, we don't need it. There was a communications department had a credenza where it had all these newspapers. They would get Sunday papers. So on Monday morning, I would go in and all these papers weren't even touched. So I would ask the guy in charge of communications, I said, do you mind if I take a paper or two? I can read on my way home. He said, yeah. I said, take them all. He said, we don't. It was Chicago Times, the Boston Globe. It was all these newspapers, LA Times. It was all these newspapers from all over the country. So I got, just to read and to discover different things. But when I went to the officiating department, the officials were very happy that it wasn't you against them. I told them, I said, look, let me take care of your pay and your expenses. I want you to focus on your job on the field. I don't want you worried about what's going on back in Park Avenue in the office. Just concentrate on your job in the field. And at the end of the season, I noticed that a few of the officials, maybe about 10%, didn't have the gym reimbursement. They didn't have any expenses. So I called one or two. I said, why didn't you spend any money on your gym? Meaning what you do to keep yourself in shape and whether you get a massage after the game. They said, well, I have a country club and I work out at my country club. I said, well, send me, you may spend $25,000, $30,000 a year, but we pay $3,000 for your gym expense. Send me your receipt for that, and I'll pay at least up to the $3,000. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. I said, sure. And another person I was talking to, well, I didn't really have anything. I said, you have kids. I said, why don't you buy them a bike or buy two bikes? Right. So I said that way, because they're going to come to me. I said, when we renegotiate the contract, I said, they're going to come to me and say that people use the gym reimbursement. I'm going to say, yeah, all except 10%. I said, your union negotiated that with us. So I want you to have that. I want you to use that. So I said, if you got kids, buy them a bike, buy two bikes. I'm not going to your house and do an inventory on what you have. So go ahead. So it just built trust. The impact that the league had on me to build trust and customer service, excellent. So that's what I got from working for 22 and a half years at the league, that, and it did. The union chief said, it just built a lot of trust, because it was like, it shouldn't be you against them. We have the same uniform on. Let's work together. So that's my experience.
Yeah, there's a couple of really key words that I heard you say in there that I knew, and you actually emphasized one of them as well, right? The curiosity piece. I think that when you came into a new role and you had to go in with curiosity, not go in with like, hey, I've got all this knowledge from what I've done in the past and I'm going to revamp everything. You knew there was the opportunity for some of that revamping, but let me first understand what has happened in the past. What are the expectations for the future? How can I hear people's stories? How can I engage with them? And that curiosity piece, that's what allows you to be proactive, because you start to think of if this is happening here, what's going to happen downstream? How can we get ahead of this? And the piece that you noted about being a problem solver, but with solutions that are going to stand the test of time to the degree they can. Obviously,
yes, absolutely. I'm
a growth and change. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Right, I'm in there. I'm like, there's change. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there's always disruption, and that's always going to be the case. You're always going to have disruptions in anything you do. I don't care if it's sports business or any kind of business. Also, competitors. You have to know your competitors and know what they're doing. There are going to be disruptions. As far as when it comes to ticket sales, and I remember during the economic crisis of I would say in 2007 and 8, we knew that a lot of the big corporations weren't going to be able to buy our tickets and the suites that, the big box office suites and stuff. So we had to go and, like I said, go through our contracts and say, look, they're not going to be able to buy these because, everybody's looking. I know the big car corporations are going out of business. So they're going to be really watching this. And that's going to want to see that they're buying season tickets to the sports team. So you really got to think ahead, and you got to get ahead of a problem. And that's why I said there's two parts of a problem for me: get ahead of it, and then also stopping it so it won't happen again. And because some people, they put on their resume, I'm a problem solver, but it doesn't really tell the employer what they do, because they may have 60 resumes here and there. I got 60 people here saying that they're problem solvers. How are you going to be different? What differentiates you between them and you? What do you do different? So that's what I try to come off with.
Yeah, it's the difference between taking something small to plug a hole in a dam, right? That's going to temporarily hold it.
A Band-Aid.
A bit more time to kind of create a solution that's going to last. And absolutely. And then the other thing that I heard, which which can be applied to many cases, is that that us versus them. And that happens in a lot of different organizations, right? It could happen
Yes.
in education system. You have like, this is the administrators and this is the teachers. It can be in organizations where this is the executive and this is management and this is people that aren't in executive or management, right? Those separations that occur. And what happens then is when you stop functioning collectively, right?
Yes.
It's like, even if you were to say, okay, my left leg's going to walk that way and my right leg's going to walk that way, it doesn't work. You've got to be working cooperatively. And so what
Absolutely.
you were doing was looking to bridge that gap by showing that even though, okay, you've got a union that was representing you. And I think sometimes unions, there's a notion that maybe a union is, kind of opposition, right? Which a union's just there to protect people. And so like,
Yes.
okay, we're going to work with the union because the union was trying to find out what you wanted and get it for you. And now the responsibility is for us to recognize that because it was agreed upon and make sure that everybody feels good. So rather than waiting for people to come and complain, you, like you said, getting ahead of it and saying like, I care about what matters to you. I care about what's going to help you. And I imagine that in
future negotiations, also when they negotiate the next contract, if there's problems like that, it's very hard to have a smooth transitional. The money, the dollar is going to go up, stuff like that. But there's sometimes, the compromise is a little easier compromise when you kind of agree. And, because, there's been times when you don't want labor or your unions, you don't want these people to go away. I mean, it's very hard to get replacement players, replacement officials, because they're not the same. They're not the same quality of people. So you want to make sure that you're getting the best product on the field. So I know why the fans don't want to see replacement officials or replacement players. They want to see the real players.
Yeah.
So the negotiations go a lot smoother when you can kind of give and take. I mean, you meet somewhere in the middle of the country in Dallas or something and say, look, we're going to iron our differences out. You're not going to go away with your fist pump. You're not going to go away with your fist pump either. But, we're going to compromise and do what we both love is the game. We both love this game. Let's keep it going the way it's supposed to be exhibit, the entertainment. Yeah. Let's keep it going the way it's supposed to be shown. So, you're going to win some things, you're going to lose some things. If something's going to give on, then maybe next time, maybe you give a little bit more, they give a little bit more. But we're going to keep this going.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I was thinking about, because I know, and you started to talk about it a little bit when you were introducing yourself, because you also have the passion for genealogy, right? And when you were talking about being younger and thinking about like things being beyond you, the world being beyond you, and your existence being about those things. And I feel like there's a really strong and palpable connection between that passion you have for genealogy and the passion that you have for people. Because when you're meeting somebody with curiosity and recognizing that this person is a history. It's a history of all the places that they've been and all the people that have brought them to where they are. Any challenges that they faced in getting to this point, any things that are really important and matter to them in their life. And when you're recognizing that and seeing that this person is a whole collection of experiences and history, you lean in to want to help and to want to recognize and to want to figure out ways to compromise, because their whole being is connected to your whole being.
Yes.
Sometimes very directly, right? You can even look back at a tree and be like, hey, look. But I think, symbolically and really literally, we are all connected globally. And so when you're going into an organization, something specifically as big as the NFL, when I think you could almost get into the tunnel vision of like grouping people in like these people fall into this pocket and this group of people fall into this pocket, but looking at it as these are all people with interests, curiosities, and what is going to be the way that we're going to best to collaborate. I mean, do you think, looking back, because you talked about as a kid kind of having a narrow concept, which we all do, of how big the world is, but when you had that moment and you started to recognize the world is bigger than me and my history goes back, does that drive your passion in business operations?
Yes, absolutely. And the curiosity is what drives me when it comes to the business as well, because when my sister did the project and kicked off as I got older, it's been 20 years now. It kicked off my curiosity about genealogy. And and following people. I mean, the people that my grandmother had given her a list, and some of the people I'm still looking for. Some of the people, what happened is, especially some of the women, they get married to other people, and you don't know what their new last names are. And sometimes people, you think they should be living here, but maybe they migrated up north, or we're from South Carolina, so maybe they went to New York City or Philadelphia, or they went to other parts, Detroit, where maybe there's factory work, and Ford and in the assembly lines, and so sometimes they go where the work is, and down South Carolina during the early 1900s, there's a lot of hurricanes, so people were leaving a lifestyle, farming and things of that nature. So you went to the cities and you try to change their narrative a little bit. But some people I've been looking for years. So yes, that spilled over into my curiosity. So as I went from one position to the next, I always try to say, what happened? What's working? What's not working? So that's what I kind of tailor my curiosity to find out how can we make it better? Because sometimes at the end of the season we get a great job, did a great job, but my boss would always say, and I think the same way, that only means one thing: we got to raise the bar. We got to do even more, better. We got to do better next year. We got to do. How can we do better? How can we do what we did? Either save time, save money, or just make it better. How do we make this process better? And I think that's why we're here, to make our lives and our families and everything better.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's how you and I connected, right? I mean, we were posting stuff, and we were trying to figure out where was the initial intersection. I'm sure we could trace back the activity to get there, but the reality was something that I had posted initially was something that I had posted that resonated with you, and you connected with it, and then we've been able to kind of feed off of each other's content, specifically on LinkedIn. But that's what, you're talking about. I mean, it's about educating and teaching people. Sometimes it's about teaching people concepts, but sometimes it's about teaching people the me of me. Like, who am I and why am I? Because as I share those parts, it helps somebody learn why I look at things a certain way. It invites somebody else to share why they look at things a certain way. And I see that a lot. And I mean, even more so, you've really been kind of increasing your visibility in terms of the content you're posting, but that desire to teach, not just to get in and say, this is wrong, I'm going to fix it, and we're going to move on. But let me have this conversation. Let me help people understand how I got to this suggestion. Let's talk about what your thoughts are on it. And it becomes very collaborative. And I imagine that that's something that you probably had to practice on a regular basis, right? You can't kind of walk in and be like, hey, this is everything that's changing. You need to really work to have people make those decisions together in order to have the buy-in.
Yeah, they have to realize why they're changing. I was on the risk management team, and a boss he put me on the team, and he said, I want you to lead this team. And we had an audit back, about 3 years before, and we got a just a passing grade. Say it like that. And my boss said, I want an exemplary. I don't want just passing. So he said, I want you to sit down with the auditors and find out, why did we just get. So, I went to the auditors, and they said, well, you're not going to get an exemplary if some of the scores that you had on your last audit, you had long time getting a contracts. We wanted to see certain contracts. You took a long time getting these contracts to us. You had things where we asked for medical records, maybe some of the officials or whatever. And he said, I went to a person to get these records, and they were right on their desk. They said they should be HIPAA law. They should be locked away in a file cabinet. Now, we don't care if you just throw the files in a cabinet. We're not housekeepers. They just have to be in a locked cabinet. They don't have to be in alphabetical order. They just have to be. So, when we had this audit, I went and I talked to the staff. I said, we can do this. We can definitely get an exemplary. We just have to clean up some things. So the first thing I did was clean up some of the findings from the previous audit. And some of these findings were second findings. We've had audits, and some of these things were second and third offenses. So I said, we got to, before we do anything new, and also too, you get new people. Sometimes people come, people go. So you got to make sure that the new people understand the bar. You got to understand, they understand the process we do. And because some of the processes that the auditors are testing are company policy things, and sometimes they're departmental policies. So we have to make sure that we're following our own policies, and also, of course, company policy. So, but we did get an exemplary, but it did take a little work, and your staff has to, come along. You're trying to bring the staff along. Now, I didn't tell them what my boss said. He said, if anybody doesn't want to do this, they can't work here. I didn't go that far. I never had a problem.
No threats.
I never had that sort of a problem where someone just just shut it down. No, I didn't have that. But he did say that. He said, well, tell them if they don't, get back to you or answer these questions, he says they can't work here because this is what we need to do. So, but I never had to go that far.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I mean, and I've done such a wide scope of different type of consulting with different types of organizations. So there's kind of a variety of stuff, but like one thing that I have noticed kind of consistently is particularly when you're working on some type of hardware, software, policy change that's impacting the way people are going to do work on a daily basis, right? Whether it's you have to log in through this system before you log into that system, or you have to lock up the files and stuff. And so it's changing the way that somebody has been doing something. And in some cases, it's the way somebody's been doing something for many years. And in the past, it may have been acceptable, or it may not have even been acceptable. It's just It was being allowed. And so, like a lot of times, if you say, and this is kind of carrying on this theme, right? If you say to somebody, well, this is what you're going to have to do now, and it's going to take you 15, 30 minutes longer, whatever the particular impact is, the person obviously isn't going to necessarily feel excited until you explain the reason, right? I mean, I think like specifically, I've seen this a lot of times with cybersecurity. People will be like, why do I now have to do this and this and this in order just to get into this system? And when you explain, because if you don't, here's the impact that it could have. Here's the amount of money it could cost the organization. Here's the risk to your data. Right. So it's like it's having those conversations and saying those pieces. And so while sometimes it's something very dramatic like that, right? Like if you don't do this, you could cost the company millions of dollars.
Yes.
But in other cases, there's reputational damage, which we can't necessarily put a number on. There's cultural, in the organization, cultural impact in terms of how people feel about how they're being seen and how they're being able to contribute. So all of those different things are part of it. And when you take the time to say to somebody, this is the reason why, as opposed to just like, this is what you're doing, it facilitates incredible growth. And oftentimes you get suggestions from people that are even better than the suggestion you're posing.
Yes, that's true. And, sometimes the bosses that are departmental bosses, they don't want to get complaints because these audits go up top. They go to the top people. They say, look, it's the same problems year after year after year after year. We need somebody that's going to make these changes. Why is these changes repeat findings? We need to fix these things. So that was the reason why too. I say I want an exemplary. I don't want just a satisfactory rating. I want exemplary. So that's what I'm looking for, exemplary. And we did get it, but it did take a little work, and the staff cooperated. And once they understood why we're doing it, and also if they change their practices day to day, it's not so difficult. We gotta have processes in place, and you have to follow. Don't skip steps. Don't get tired, and you have to follow these processes. So that's what the changes were made, and things came out well.
What was one of your because I want to shift into some of your other interests in a minute, but from a working specifically with the NFL, you did a lot of different things. What was one of your favorite? I mean, and I'm going to acknowledge that you might have liked a lot of different things, but what was one of your favorite roles or projects or things that you worked on while you were there?
My favorite thing was working with the game officials. I like the fact that I came up with some different policies. For example, I came up with a spreadsheet. All the officials were guaranteed 15 games, but sometimes our schedule only allowed, it was only maybe 14 games. And so at the end of the season, we gave them a extra game fee because of our scheduling. And sometimes people got 16 games because of our scheduling. Or sometimes there's a weather delays. And that's one thing I will say about our staff, especially the officiating staff. They make heroic actions to get to these games. I mean, sometimes there's snow, there's hurricanes, there's stuff. And then we do let them go a couple of days before. The policy is they have to be in the city 24 hours before the game. That's standard policy across the league. But when there's storms coming or there's bad weather or something like that, we allow them to go in a little earlier. But, sometimes these officials will get in a car, they get together, they get in a car and they'll drive sometimes 12, 15 hours. So I appreciate the fact that they went through great lengths about their job. But I like most about at the end of the season, I came up with a schedule that showed how many games they worked up to week 16. So that way when week 17 came along, I was able to let the boss know, the VP of officiating know that, okay, these are officials who are right at 15 or they at 14. Some people are at 16. Can we take them a week off and let these other people work the game? So I was very proud of that. I was very proud of the fact, I was able to manipulate the schedule and to work to we save money, not have to spend extra money. So it's about cost saving. And that was one of my favorite things working with the game officials. They were a great group of folks. They cared about what they did. I mean, the game is fast. So yes, they get graded on every call. They get graded on no call. They made no calls, the right call, a bad call. I mean, these are human beings. The game is getting faster and faster and faster. These players can run faster and faster and faster. So with the use of replay and all that, we're able to make the right calls. Not all the time, but I think it works very, very well. And they really do their jobs and they care about what they're doing.
Yeah, that's when you just mentioned, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking officials get a lot of anger thrown at them because there's two teams playing, right? So
yes.
Inevitably somebody's going to be upset at something that happens, and the technology has certainly helped, but then there are people that kind of are opposed to technology, that it should be more just on the field. So there's a lot of different pieces to that, but I think that I was thinking from what I know about your past, that was one of the things I thought would be really intriguing, because like they have to be in really good shape. They have to be really, able to withstand the volatile situation that could sometimes come up about some of that stuff. Makes
they have a meeting once a year and they get tested on rules. Sometimes there's new rules that just come out and they get tested on these rules. And they get an individual test. They get a team test, a crew test when they work in crews. They get tested. So because we want them to be out there knowing the rules, not partially, kind of, sort of. They have to know the rules. I mean, and they have to stay physically in shape. That's why we give them the gym membership. They're expected to stay in shape. I mean, there's a lot to it. I mean, some of the people have other jobs. They're judges. They're teachers. They're firemen, and some this is all they do. I mean, this is they've worked very hard at this. You have to work 10 years in officiating. A lot of times it's college sports before you can even be considered. And we start recruiting you, start watching you, and watching your plays. And again, the league, they every call they make, every time they're making sure they're in the right position when they make a call. And sometimes they don't make good calls. So at the end of the season, they have a grading system. We'll say this. The grading system is they get graded on every call. And then at the end of the season, when it comes to postseason, this is how they determine who's going to be in the postseason. There was a year going back when one of the fans have gotten together and said, look, there's no African Americans in the Super Bowl. Why not? So, my boss came up with it. We have a system. So when you be taken to court, you can go to court with a piece of paper in your hand. You can say, well, there's none there because these people are the ones that made the grade, the highest grade. We're the people that are in that game. So you can see it's a fair system. It's not something that we've come up with. It's just something that's fair and equitable. It's an equitable system. So it's not anything we say, well, we like you. You get, you're in. Right. It doesn't go that way. It works on. So we had to come up with a system like that. So if you get called in a court, you have something in your hand and say, this is why.
Yeah, absolutely. So few things here, because the genealogy piece, and there's the process optimization thing, and you're traveling, and I'm kind of curious because you travel and you said you really love to travel.
Yes, I love to travel.
Are you like a planner? Like, are you looking to optimize your trips? Do you tend to just go and kind of like go with the flow, or you like agenda things out and like really want to make sure that you can make the most of the trip?
We don't do a lot of beach vacations, so it's not a lot of going like we were younger. Okay. So I like the Caribbean a lot. Now, when I was in NFL Europe, I did travel there twice a year. We had our finance meeting in the fall, and then in June we had the World Bowl, and we all traveled to the World Bowl. But going to these different places, I've been to Germany many, many times, different parts of Germany, Amsterdam, Scotland. I've been to many, many different places, Barcelona. It's been just opens up the world to see people, other places, the food, what's going on. It's just the fans. I mean, fans in Europe, they love our game. They really, really do. Now they have soccer, which is big, but they love our game. Now we're playing games. We don't have teams over there. We're just playing some of our games, our professional games. We're playing some weeks. We go over there. But the Europeans love our game. They really, really love. But I love the travel. Travel is, I think, it opens up your mind. It opens up possibilities. I love cruises. I really, really enjoy travel. And genealogy is something I do on the side. Again, I'm constantly looking for. They always have new records come out. I'm involved with this newspaper.com as papers going back to the 1800s, and sometimes I find my family members that made the paper for whatever reason. They're in the newspaper, or whether it's wedding or something. But for me, it's like, sometimes my wife said, if you find something about my family, don't tell me if there's anything bad. I was like, let history fall where it is. If somebody was in jail, because I don't want to know. I said, history falls where it falls. That's the way I look at it. I mean, if something was good, it's good. If it's bad, it's not good. This is what it is. I mean, so for me, it's like history is what it is. If it falls on good ground, bad ground, it's just what it is. But I really, really enjoy looking into the past, looking into, and some of these people I've never even heard of before. It wasn't a family discussion. And that's what really intrigues me, and it really spikes my curiosity. And also leaving a paper. Sometimes there's not a good paper trail. And so I try to talk to the oldest family members I can before they pass on, because I was talking to one person in my family was 104, and she passed away the next year. But I had a very healthy conversation with her. I would go by her house after church, and we talked for an hour, 2 hours, and she gave me names. I have a pen, I'm writing down, and she was spot on with her names. You would think, her mind was clear. Wow. And my grandfather gave me a lot of good information too. He had a very good childhood. And my grandmother, she wasn't interested in, because, her childhood wasn't as good as, my grandfather. So she didn't want to remember. She just wanted to leave that. Some people do, not just her. Yeah. I've come across people who I don't really want to talk about that. Or sometimes they've been in a war, and it's like, the memories, and, I just did what I had to do. It's just, it wasn't anything that was pleasant, anything that was, I would want to talk about, so I don't press anybody. You don't want to talk about it, I leave it alone. I don't say, well, come on, let's do it. No, I leave it alone. I just leave it alone, And I wish I had talked to more people. I wish I had known more about this stuff. My grandmother was alive. My dad's mother was alive. I wish I'd have, questioned her a little bit more about some things. And believe it or not, some people are willing to share once you open up. Once you start asking questions, they are willing to share these things. So the genealogy is close to my heart. I do take some time out in my day, even if it's an hour, even if it's late at night. I'll take one person and see if I can follow them from the cradle to the grave. I'll take one person and see if I can follow their whole life through the census. Sometimes the death certificate has stuff. Sometimes people are buried in family plots. So sometimes if I can't find them, I'll look at their brother or sister and see where they are as far as. But it's a journey. It's definitely a journey. And like I said, the women are harder because they get married, and I don't know what their new married name is. So that's what makes it difficult. That's what makes them so much more difficult.
Yeah, I found it because I've done some, not to that degree, but I had done some research. I think there were some losses that I experienced in my family that kind of triggered you, like, I wonder when that person came, or where they came from, or what's the story. And I'd done a little bit of research, and it was neat because my great grandmother came over from Germany through Ellis Island, and I was able to find the manifest where they had signed in. Yes. They had come over to visit at one point, and I was able to then, doing a little digging, even find a picture of the actual ship that they had been on. Yes. Now, I don't know if it was pulling into port. It doesn't necessarily mean that was the time that they pulled into port, that picture. And it's interesting because, to you, like what you were saying too, it does give you this sense of like the expanse of who you are and what's brought you to where you are. And again, carrying that over to just kind of when you acknowledge that each person is such a big scope of experiences and history and impact and all of these things that we don't add up. And, what you said about kind of history falling where it is, because I think we do need to kind of recognize and remember that. And there are obviously some things that people have done that are horrible, right? And we find those out, but then we'll also find all of these amazing things out, right? And there's very few journeys of anybody that I've ever met that doesn't have some things that they might prefer be left off the story. Right. But that's all part of that path that brings us to where
we all have twists and turns, and that's what I was talking to my wife. We all have twists and turns in almost everything that we do, and sometimes people's path isn't always straight. Sometimes people get divorced, or they get remarried, or people die. Back in those days, tuberculosis was very prominent, and diseases. I did have some people that friends that I've worked with. They asked, Mike, can you look up my grandfather? And they came through Ellis Island, and sometimes they the name was shortened for whatever reason. It's just
change.
different things. And also, too, sometimes they had to have a representative, like a family member here. And especially like they go to New York, they have an address, and were they healthy when they arrived? I mean, there's a lot of different nuances to this, and it's really fascinating. It really fascinates me on the whole journey. And why did they even come here? Why did they get on? I mean, that's the scary stuff. Like, these people got on a boat and came to somewhere they don't even know about.
I know.
I mean, the land of the unknown. But maybe life was bad where they left, or was it good? Why did they come here? There was one story, I watched that show, Finding Your Roots, with Dr. Gates, and it was one of them. They had an actress on there, and this young gentleman's mother died, and the father put him. He was 7 years old, on a boat to America, and he never saw the father again. The father never saw him again, but he knew that the kid had a better chance coming here than staying in Italy where they were. So he said he put the kid on the boat, and he never seen the kid again. He never seen his father again. It's like, I can't imagine being 7 years old and relying on strangers to take care of me. And that's what happened. The people on the boat, there's other, women and men on the boat. They took care of this kid. And then when he got there, I think he had to work with a family for like 10 years. And he became very, very famous. He became very, famous in his life. He's wound up doing a whole lot in his life. But maybe this was this time when he had to, it was uncertain. Look, I don't have a mother or father. I got to figure this out. And it made him stronger. It made him stronger. So you never know how and where, your history and past. But I'm always looking like, what happened? Who was their mother and father? Who was? Go going back and back and back. But sometimes the paper trail runs cold. It does. It runs cold sometimes. But I'm glad to see that.
Names? Have you found any cool names? Like, I've come across some names, and I can't think of any of them off the top of my head right now. But it'll be like Dorothea, Malia, you know what I mean? Like, I'll find out these names and I'm just like, wow. And, then you want to know, like, was that traditional name at that time? Or was it something that was handed down for a specific reason? Or have you come across
sometimes the census taker, when they go to, at that time, the census taker would come to the house and they would, as they heard it, they would write it down, because sometimes these people couldn't read or write. So if you said your name was Harrison, they spelled Harrison with S-E-N. I mean,
right.
Just saying, so your name, maybe one R. So there are many different, and then you can't find them because the name is spelled different. Sometimes you can't find them, and you say, look, I know they should be living here 10 years ago. They were living here in 1920, but 1930, they disappeared. Well, their name might be there, but their name is different. The census taker may have botched their name, the spelling. And I think they said they tried twice coming to the house or to the farm. And if they don't get a response, or they don't get someone to come to the door, they would ask the neighbor. So maybe your neighbor doesn't know your husband's full name or what year he was born. So, it's just maybe your neighbor only knows so much about you.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's an interesting point, that they would ask the neighbor. That's kind of like leaving it to chance a little bit. Like, hey, what's going on in the house next door? Yeah. They got a couple kids.
Right.
I think they heard
them left off, because maybe the neighbor don't know they had a baby 2 years ago. And sometimes these neighbors weren't like, we live close, so our neighbors are right next door. But sometimes these neighbors they're farms, so they're really, really far away. So and they get the date wrong. I don't know what year they were born, so they it's twists and turns like that with the genealogy. Definitely twists and turns. Yeah.
So 5 years, I mean, and maybe you're like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Do you have like a 5-year projection with all these different things that you do and all of these experiences you have or are there some big things that you're like, I'd really like to do this?
I'd really like to work back in sports again. Back to like one of the big leagues, like the NBA or Major League Soccer. I'd like to continue doing what I'm doing, because there's always something to be learned, something new, something that, we haven't seen. I mean, things are constantly changing with AI. I mean, how is AI impacting sports? As far as even with replay, I mean, competition. How are we monitoring the competitors, the new competitors, new market entrants? And there's people that you always got to look around, because there's always someone, another league, another opportunity. So you always constantly stay nimble. You have to stay nimble too. So that, for me, just to staying nimble and to keep growing. That's my thing. How about yourself?
Yeah, I had written my poetry book. I'd like to write a book. I'm going to write a companion book to that, and I'd like to do an anecdotal book, so like less a memoir but more, I mean it is a memoir, but I guess it's not like here's when I was born and then here's where I am now, but more of just anecdotes and stories, because I really have found that it's so neat when I share stories to see all the ways that we connect on things, people that you wouldn't necessarily connect on, right? I mean, for you and I, right, because of LinkedIn have connected.
Yes.
Otherwise, our lives probably, I mean, I can't say for sure, but our lives probably would not have kind
Never
of
have
connected.
intersected.
And then
Right.
we're finding, that we both have this passion for teaching and optimizing and being curious and spreading kindness. So I do like to share stories and find the ways that we all can kind of connect with each other. And I think just really push this wave of kindness into every place it could possibly go, by modeling, by having conversations with folks like yourself, who I know also, emulate that. So by really connecting with people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a question I had for you. What inspired you to blend poetry with leadership and personal development? What
Ooh,
inspired you to?
what a great question. Wow. Well, so I'll go back to, I always, from the time that I was young and could write, and even I think prior to writing, there was always words in my head. I was thinking of things in terms of like, I would see something happen and I would start to write in my head the experience that I just saw. And so I've had this kind of connection with describing and explaining things, which also correlates with me liking to take pictures. So once I could start writing, I did a lot of writing. Some of it turned into verse and some of it turned into prose. It would be paragraph stuff, short stories, or like anecdotes and stuff. At the same time that I had that natural skill, I also noticed that I had this skill for encouraging and leading people in positive ways, for seeing something in somebody and being able to help them see the strength that they had and
Yes.
bring that out in them. And I think the correlation became my ability to find words that fit the situation, because you could describe something in 15 different ways and they would all be accurate. But I have this ability to describe things with the right particular words, which linked with, I can see the gift in this person. I want to help them see it. This
Yeah.
is the way that I think they're going to hear it. And I guess symbolically, sometimes that's in a poetic way, right? Some people like to be spoken to in ways that are very song like and encouraging, and other people need very matter of fact, like these are the steps you could take.
Right.
And so I actually was a teacher first. I was a teacher for 13 years, high school
Wow.
teacher,
Didn't know
and I
that.
loved it. Yeah, and it would be a long story to explain kind of everything that happened, but some life circumstances took place, and I ended up in the consulting world. But that educator, right, which ties in with the wanting to find the right words to help somebody to understand something, wanting to
Yes.
encourage somebody to be that way. And so that was a natural segue when I got into consulting to help lead people and encourage them for growth and change. But the poet and writer in me has just always existed. And so for some reason, I kept kind of putting this, like, when I have time, I'll get to this, even though I had loads and loads of poetry and all this stuff, but it was like, it was off to the side. And I realized I'm not waiting for the right time to be a writer. I am a writer.
Right.
I'm not putting it out there in that way because I'm not seeing the alignment. And yet, really, my ability to kind of put words together in a way that makes sense, and my ability to lead and encourage people and see change and optimization similar to you, connected with the poetry. So the poet in me was like, this holding on is done. We're doing this. We're going forward. And it's been amazing. Like, I love that you asked that question, how much I have found the correlation between the poet in me and the leader in me.
Absolutely. And there's one other question I had was, what advice would you give leaders to balance performance with mental health? What advice would you give leaders to balance performance with mental health?
Oh, that's a great one. So I think first and foremost, one of the things that I encourage, I would say almost everybody, I can almost even say I would encourage everybody, is journaling. Journaling is important because I think it allows us to talk about things we wouldn't say out loud, even with our closest friend, right? So it helps us to kind of process those things. And so it allows us to tap into a few things. What's going on emotionally with whatever the situation is, whether it's very specific performance based, like you're trying to accomplish a goal, or it's going to impact how you're perceived or heard, your ability to have people listen to you. So it impacts you. You're tapping into, like, here's what I see in myself, here's what I feel in myself, both those two pieces together. And so I say that to people that I think that they need to check when they're doing that journaling, to see that there is a balance in that they're not putting too much weight on those performance based things and not paying attention to the emotional component of it, right? like we do have to push through some stress. And I think that sometimes people that are very goal driven feel like that's I got to push through the stress. And then you'll have people who will go like, you don't push through the stress, you need to stop. But there's a balance, right? We do need to push through stress.
Right.
And stress and even anxiety and worry, as negative as the connotations as those two terms have a very specific purpose. They help us to stop and pause. They help us to consider circumstances. They give us adrenaline. Adrenaline helps us to accomplish things, whether it's running fast on a field or helping to get something done and in by a deadline. And so the check-in on those two things. But obviously, if we're going to talk about which is more important, I'm always, till the end of my days, going to advocate for mental health becomes more important than any other performance indicator. And so if you start to notice that either your performance is declining because of mental health things, or you're just really not doing well, right? And we can check ourselves physically. Am I tired? Am I able to do things I used to be able to do? Am I thinking clearly? We joke a lot about it in our house, but like when I don't get a lot of sleep, I'll start to say things and I'm like, that didn't even make sense. Like that's an indicator, right? Like it's funny and we're like, oh, Deb didn't get enough sleep, but that's an indicator that my body is not getting something that it needs, because our brains want to function the way they're supposed to function.
Yes.
So if I'm starting to mix up my words or get confused, then that's an indicator. So that's why it's important to kind of do those journals and do those check-ins to make sure that you're taking care of your physical well-being. And the biggest motivator that I find that most people will relate to, you could be a new parent, you could be a leader in an organization, you could be an athlete. If you don't pay attention to the mental health component, your performance is going to be eradicated anyway. Yes. So like when people are like, well, I can't take the break because then I'm not going to get my job done. And I'm like, if you collapse in exhaustion, you're not going to get the job done.
Right. Self-judgment too. Self-judgment. Because maybe I'm not looking at it, but you judge yourself. You can hold yourself back by overly self-judgment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think having somebody with you that can hold you appropriately accountable. I know that it's not a gift that everybody has, that they can just look to the side to them and they're going to have somebody that they ultimately trust. But I say, like, make a concerted effort to look for that, whether it's a mentor, a family member, a friend, somebody that you can check in with who's going to notice some of those signs when you don't necessarily notice them because you're in the grind.
Yeah.
Right. Like you'll think about, like I think about with athletes, sometimes the coach will say, like, I noticed your form is off. Right. And the athlete may not have noticed that because they're not looking at themselves. So it's that person who can kind of help you to check in on those things and be able to talk about it, because it's so important. Everybody really needs to do that. So I think journaling, accountability, and reminding yourself that if you collapse in exhaustion, you're not getting any of your goals accomplished.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the questions that I asked. Thank you. You answered them perfectly.
I think you need to start doing a show. Those were great questions. Those were great questions. It's like the question I wanted to be asked but didn't even know. Like when you asked those, I was like, that's a really, I like thinking about that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you.
So before we get your final thought that you're going to leave everybody with, even though you just gave them a whole bunch of incredible tidbits, how do people follow you? Obviously LinkedIn. So if you want to share with people how they can get in contact with you or follow you and consume your awesome content.
Definitely on LinkedIn. That was the most powerful way that I communicate as far as my social media. I'm not on Facebook or anything like that, but definitely on LinkedIn. Definitely LinkedIn.
And you're Michael Willis on LinkedIn.
Michael Willis, can put LaSalle University, NFL. I'll come up.
And I have it in your bio, but I also will share it. And I want to encourage people, as I always do, obviously reach directly out to him. You don't need to go through me, but if you'd like an introduction, like some people are like, could you tee up the introduction? I would love to connect you. I'd love to see you, as you noted, be able to infiltrate some other athletic organizations and create the impact that you have. But, my number one thing is just being really grateful to be able to be connected with you on LinkedIn and to be able to see the content you're consuming in this conversation, which we're still going. We probably could have gone another 2 hours, but
yes. I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me here. I'd like to come back again.
Sure. Yeah. We'll have to. I'm going to be doing these, and I don't know if I've talked about it recently. I'm going to be doing these things called the panel chats, where I'm going to be collecting people. It'll be 4 or 5 people on a specific topic. And then facilitating and having them discuss. So I'm sure I could have you on the panel, but I also think you'd also be a great interviewer with me, because I bet you'd come up with some cool questions. So we'll have to tag team on that. But I think, again, just kind of the hearing how different people can talk about a similar topic, I think is going to be really neat. So those will be called the panel chats, and hoping to launch those probably going to wait until December because I want to get through some so that I can really do it correctly. But why don't you give everybody a final thought? Again, this could be inspirational, intellectual, entertaining, whatever kind of strikes you as something you'd like to say to everybody as your final thought.
My final thought would be curiosity. Keep your curiosity, because your curiosity will drive almost everything you do. Stay curious and stay asking questions, looking under the carpet, just keep wondering, how did this happen, or why did this happen? Just stay curious.
I love that. It's one of my favorite words, and I appreciate you. So thank you again for being here today. Thank you everybody for joining us. I saw we had a lot of people kind of coming on, and I'm curious to look back and see if we had any questions or comments. But I appreciate people listening to the conversation and taking away from it what they will and sharing it. So I say take care to everybody, and thank you again, Michael, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.